Hey, what's up? I know you'll see I'm wearing a particular shirt. No, it is not because there's no sleeves on it. Even though we did a tutorial on how to create these shirts not too long ago with Urson Religioso. I left it on before I get cleaned up here. Just got back from training at MI40. I left it on because this shirt is actually 20 years old, and this was the one of the original D League teams. Now you know it as the G League, and it was almost a little emotional. So meaning it was emotional that I found it, and I'm like, oh my god, like this shirt is from Columbus, Georgia, and I sent it to the assistant coach today, and I sent it to our radio guy who I roomed with, a TV radio guy, and it was people sometimes wonder some of the things that go on inside pro sports, and it's when you it's not all, but you can develop some relationships that a raggedy old cutoff shirt can rekindle some text messages and some relationships for a very, very long time. So these are things that everybody would tell you that have worked in pro sports. Maybe those are things that people would they would think is typical and standard, but a lot of other things, particularly when it comes to the clinical piece, is not what people think. So I want to use the motivation from some things that would maybe be not what people would expect. And one of them is a call that I took recently regarding a junior basketball player. So both are definitely tied together, and we'll take those situations and try to tie it to some clinical things that I think are relevant to all levels of training and rehabilitation as it relates to monitoring heart rate. Years and years ago, a buddy of mine was the strength coach at a major Division I school, basketball, major school. So if I told you the name of the school, which I won't, you would be probably expecting the standards of everything involved with managing young people that are at the college level as far as winning basketball games. So my buddy was using First Beat. I've been a customer of First Beat for several years, maybe 6 or 7. Always paid for the product. Anything more than that we received was simply brilliant customer service from a fellow named John Lally, who, if First Beat is of interest, fantastic device, fantastic systems, and always actually getting better, which sometimes can be frustrating because it's like you just budgeted for one thing and now they came out with something new that's that much better that you absolutely have to buy. So the buddy was using First Beat with this team and just saw some catastrophic numbers in terms of max heart rate. So obviously, it is not unreasonable to get into the 200s, to 10 even, when you're at these max levels, particularly at the college level, where beating these kids into the ground is a very typical scenario. And except if I remember correctly, this young man had gotten well over 220. I think there was one point where he spiked over 240. And the strength coach, obviously significantly alarmed, very good reason to be alarmed. And I want to say, like, when you're alarmed, it doesn't mean that something is always wrong. It just means that you have to look. Like, how can you not look? And that's going to relate to a lot of other things in terms of a very, very strong sentiment that you see in the physical therapy space that you don't need to image things. Imaging doesn't mean that you are going to do anything about it. Unless you have magnetic vision or X-ray vision, I don't know how you know that there's nothing really, really seriously wrong, and to wait to do three sessions for 4 times, 4 weeks, or you're just going to try some things because evidence may support that you really don't need surgery for a meniscal tear. How do you know? Anyway, my buddy took this information and blah blah blah. This young man's basketball career was over. He clearly had some kind of cardiac myopathy that basically ended his career. And if we were not using heart rate monitors, if he was not using heart rate monitor, you have no idea what would have happened. So even if that was, he just has a high heart rate. Remember, things are averages. People are going to live above certain averages. The kicker to that story is that the head coach told the strength coach that he did not want the heart rate monitors being used ever again with his players. True story. And I think most people would be mortified if they know the school. They should be mortified regardless, where a layer of information that, forget about performance. This is obviously usage of heart rate monitors saved this individual's life. Not a happy ending in terms of ending his career, but it didn't. What would happen if it was one of these other stories that we know of where individuals have had serious issues while playing, or even had fatal issues? Very strange that this coach had that kind of attitude, and very disappointing. Point is, I'm not sure we ever would have known if we needed to activate these healthcare issues, healthcare measures, if we weren't using heart rate probably more for performance. So, very interesting story there. Many years ago, I wasn't involved, but I know the story because it was one of my best friends that was a strength coach there. Moving on more recently. Here's the information that I was provided, and then I'll give you the information that I advised. And this is strictly in the interests of healthcare. There's nothing performance related here. However, we might use performance information to help kick us to other areas. Definitely. So this is a junior athlete, tachycardic, in the 80s, at rest. Is that the end of the world? It's high. I'm not sure an elite junior basketball player should be at those ranges, but it's not an automatic, oh my God, this is the craziest thing ever, again, because of ranges. However, getting into the 200s with multiple standard deviations above the rest of the group. So again, we're certainly now looking at an outlier. Well, pathologies are outliers. So now you get some other information that when you start to look at it objectively, when you use training loads calculations that value the heart rate, we're now seeing significant outlier levels of this individual's training load. Also, from subjective feedback from the coaches, I was told that he seems like he's lazy. Well, I would be the first to tell you, as someone that doesn't do very well at very, very high top-end heart rates, you can see what I'm trying to get better at when I do my Terrible Tuesdays. He looked very lazy, and lazy looks a lot like fatigued. Lazy, fatigued, out of shape, they all kind of look the same. However, they're all very, very different. Fatigued is different than out of shape. Out of shape means you're miserable regardless of how recovered you are. So now there's a lot of information here, and the parents did kick him to a healthcare workup. Now, from my levels of understanding, the information that gets you that kick would be heart rate, which we have a check. We see significant tachycardia, but also blood pressure, and that's another thing that whether it's a training environment, I think obviously you'll see it more in physical therapy. I'm not sure really what other allied health professions do, but we do need to be looking at looking at blood pressure on a regular basis. And it doesn't mean that every single person that has high blood pressure every single time has this horrible illness. But we don't know that. And that relates to all the getting MRIs and x-rays. I don't understand why people are so averse to looking at things. Let's continue here. If heart rate and blood pressure get you kicked, my understanding is that the next test would be ECG. In environments that I have been in, we have used technologies that have utility to be very, very close to, if not at medical level ECG. And sometimes you'll see anomalies. And doc, hey, take a look at this. and we're not going to use the technology as the primary evidence, but we're going to then kick that as well. So for this gentleman that I was called on, apparently the ECG was okay, and his resting heart rate was 74. Now, I agree that in a general health setting, 74 is not the end of the world. Like, I would expect a young elite junior basketball player probably to be well below 60, maybe well below 50. This isn't a heavy kid. This isn't just some other things that just don't add up. 74. But remember, when you engage in rank and file healthcare, they want to make sure you're not going to die, and that probably doesn't move the dial enough. And as I advise, I said sometimes high normal is the worst thing, because it's not enough to kick you to the next level. Man, so what would happen next? I think the next level of measurement would be an echocardiogram. The measure after that would be a nuclear stress test, and or a Holter monitor, where you would be measuring your heart rate and ECG throughout a 24-hour period. So now we're talking about basketball. We're talking about a tall human being. We're talking about, obviously, to some degree, explosive, which we do need to start to think about, whether it be genetic or not. I have no idea. That's why you do these measures. You do these tests of cardiac myohypertrophy. So if there is a hypertrophic of left ventricle, and we've talked about this a lot in terms of a training piece, where the eccentric heart training programs are going to potentially create hypertrophy outside, so that's this springiness, so you can fill more blood into the ventricle. Now, if you only do resistance training very, very heavy and don't ever do any cardio, you get a little bit closer to some of these other things that could also be genetic. And if your left ventricle doesn't fill up with significant amount of blood, your next option is to go tachycardic. So you'll beat your heart more times over a particular minute, because you're not getting as much out for each particular heartbeat. And that can mean training values, but in this case, we don't know this. And I thought it was very, very strange that this was not something that was explored further, because obviously there's a lot of other medical conditions that we see in tall human beings that manifest as some of these cardiac conditions. So some of the values here, I do not understand why we would not use a heart rate monitor. Well, people don't like wearing them. They're too expensive. I'd give you two examples. One where a young man's life was saved, and in another one, we might be going down that road, where I have advised mobilize healthcare team because in that situation we need to indemnify the strength and conditioning professionals that are using the heart rate monitor. We need to indemnify the organization. We need to indemnify the skills coaches. All of these people are on the hook if there is information that is not being acted upon. Well, the parents did act upon with this ECG. I'm still concerned as to why this individual's heart rate. Let's do the test and let's just find out that it's nothing, because when the ECG is normal but tachycardic, which is not, technically that's not normal, but the sinus rhythm was normal, I've got some serious questions there that if that left ventricle is not filling up substantially, then the heart rate will go up, and I'd like to know why. Using heart rate monitor, let's extrapolate that into some other worlds. Imaging doesn't mean action. Tests don't mean you have to do something about it. It's very strange. I understand it's inconvenient, and I'm certainly very much giving a message that when you do refer someone for imaging, or you do it yourself, obviously certain professionals have the wherewithal to do x-rays, you're still going to apply science, and you're not going to lose control. So again, if you're going to refer someone, no, you need to go to that physician to get the x-rays and the MRI, because you're going to be able to communicate with them in a very positive way, and it's not going to be automatic, like you've now lost your role or your seat at the table. And then lastly, appreciating from a training aspect, provided that you are using some kind of heart rate monitoring, there is a significant difference in some of these measures that can be seen on echocardiogram. Now, that's highly impractical in most situations. I do think there's reasons to get there. I think this situation is one of them. But with your eccentric heart training, where your heart rate is relatively low, it doesn't mean it's 90, it doesn't mean it's 60 or 50. It means it's relatively low and ideally below your VO2 max, which maybe you can extrapolate to 80 to 85% of your max. Now, what does all that mean? Well, it means that if your heart can be able to have this bigger eccentric contraction, which you've heard me do many times, then you're going to get more blood. So you'll get more blood for less beats. That's a healthy heart in most situations. But if the hypertrophy is on the inside, because it constantly has to punch and spit out, because you're only doing these very, very high intensity metabolic activities, you can build heart muscle that eats up the space. And if that's genetic, it can be very, very significant. So now we're looking at what appears to be a healthy sinus rhythm, but very, very tachycardic. I'm thinking that and plus a very tall individual where we know certain conditions are not only a little bit more prevalent but highly lethal, and we've seen this. So use a heart rate monitor. Well, right here, just do this, or just do that. I don't, I think you can improve your training. You might be able to save somebody's life. Anybody seen a leprechaun? Say yeah.